You are listening to Influence When You're Not the Boss, by Lumen Audiobooks. One meeting, one ask, zero title. Bias-aware listening, word-for-word language. And a simple cycle to land approvals fast. Walk in with a plan, walk out with a yes. Prologue. The influence advantage. You face this reality every day. You need a decision made. You need a timeline approved. You need budget allocated. You need buy-in from other teams. The person who controls these things sits somewhere else. They don't report to you. You don't report to them. Yet the work depends on them. This scenario repeats across organizations. Individual contributors drive projects without formal authority. Product managers coordinate without control. Operators move initiatives forward across departments. Each person needs influence more than they need hierarchy. The traditional command and control model breaks down in modern work. Collaboration and cross-functional work demand a different approach. Influence without authority feels uncomfortable at first. You want to respect boundaries. You don't want to seem pushy or manipulative. You worry about overstepping or damaging relationships. These concerns make sense. Yet the alternative creates frustration and missed opportunities. Influence becomes a necessary skill when you care about outcomes and relationships. The key difference lies in the approach. Authority says, "Because I said so." Influence says, "Because this makes sense for all of us." Authority relies on position power. Influence builds on trust, credibility, and mutual benefit. Authority creates compliance. Influence creates commitment. Authority solves problems temporarily. Influence builds lasting solutions. Consider the project manager who needs engineering resources. They could escalate to leadership and demand prioritization. This might work once or twice. The long-term effect damages relationships and creates resistance. Instead, they map stakeholder concerns and craft a proposal that addresses everyone's priorities. They frame the request in terms of business outcomes rather than personal needs. They show how helping this project creates value for the engineering team's goals. The outcome changes dramatically. The engineering lead feels consulted rather than dictated to. They see how their team's contribution drives broader success. They commit resources willingly rather than reluctantly. The relationship strengthens instead of weakens. Both parties win. This book focuses on bias-aware influence techniques. You learn how cognitive biases affect decisions around you. You discover how to present information that works with natural thinking patterns rather than against them. You avoid the common trap of assuming others think rationally and logically. Human decision-making involves emotions, shortcuts, and automatic responses. Research in behavioral economics reveals these patterns consistently. People default to familiar solutions when under pressure. They seek information that confirms existing beliefs. They overweight recent events and dramatic examples. They defer to perceived expertise and authority. They minimize risks to their status and relationships. Understanding these patterns gives you an advantage. The prep cycle provides a simple framework for consistent influence success. Prepare by researching stakeholders and context. Prime the environment by building awareness and relevance. Perform using proven scripts and techniques. Post by following up and reinforcing positive outcomes. This cycle becomes second nature with practice. Each chapter builds on the previous one. You start with understanding influence fundamentals. You examine your own credibility and relationship patterns. You learn to recognize bias dynamics in your organization. You develop systematic approaches to mapping influence networks. You master listening techniques that reveal true concerns and motivations. The middle chapters provide practical application. You get conversation scripts for common scenarios. You learn email templates that generate responses. You discover negotiation techniques that create value rather than winners and losers. You handle high-stakes conversations with confidence and grace. Each tool works independently and builds on previous skills. The later chapters focus on long-term influence development. You learn to build relationships that compound over time. You discover how to scale your influence across teams and departments. You create systems that multiply your impact. You establish yourself as someone others seek out for advice and collaboration. This approach respects organizational hierarchy while achieving results. You don't bypass formal channels or undermine leadership. You work within existing structures to create better outcomes. You help decision-makers make informed choices. You build consensus rather than forcing compliance. The techniques work across different cultures and industries. The principles of human motivation and decision-making remain consistent. You adapt the scripts and examples to fit your specific context. The underlying framework stays the same. Influence relies on understanding people, not controlling them. Your success depends on consistent application. Influence skills develop through practice and refinement. Start small and build gradually. Use the techniques in low-stakes situations first. Learn what works in your environment. Adapt and improve based on feedback. The investment pays dividends throughout your career. The book provides practical tools you can use immediately. Each chapter includes ready-to-use scripts and templates. You find examples that match common scenarios in modern organizations. The language remains simple and direct. The techniques focus on ethical persuasion and mutual benefit. You finish this book with a complete influence toolkit. You understand when and how to apply different techniques. You can adapt your approach based on situation and audience. You feel confident handling difficult conversations and tricky negotiations. More importantly, you build stronger relationships while achieving better results. Influence becomes more important as organizations flatten and work becomes more collaborative. Your ability to drive outcomes without formal authority separates high performers from the rest. This skill compounds over time. Each successful influence moment builds credibility for the next challenge. The goal isn't manipulation or control. It's creating alignment and commitment. It's helping others see possibilities they might miss. It's finding solutions that benefit multiple parties. It's building trust through consistent follow-through and mutual respect. Start with the fundamentals. Build your credibility bank account. Map your influence networks. Master the basic techniques. Apply them consistently. Measure your results. Adjust your approach based on what works in your specific environment. The influence advantage awaits those who invest in developing these skills. Your projects depend on it. Your career progression relies on it. Your ability to create meaningful change requires it. Time to get started. Chapter 1. Rethinking Power and Influence. You hear the word influence and something uncomfortable stirs. Maybe you think of manipulation or politics. Maybe you picture someone cutting corners to get their way. Maybe you assume influence requires charisma or deception. These associations trap you in limiting beliefs that undermine your effectiveness. Your organization rewards results over titles. The person who delivers outcomes without formal authority becomes indispensable. Yet you resist using influence techniques because they feel manipulative. You prefer to wait for permission rather than create momentum. This hesitation costs you opportunities and damages your career trajectory. Power and influence operate on different fundamentals. Power relies on position and control. Influence depends on trust and value. Power says, "Follow me because I outrank you." Influence says, "Follow me because this path benefits everyone." Power creates compliance through fear or obligation. Influence creates commitment through understanding and mutual benefit. Authority comes from organizational charts. Influence emerges from relationships and results. Authority dictates tasks. Influence inspires action. Authority solves immediate problems. Influence builds lasting solutions. You can't function effectively in modern organizations without developing influence skills. Many people confuse influence with manipulation. The distinction lies in intent and transparency. Manipulation seeks personal benefit through deception or coercion. Influence creates mutual benefit through persuasion and relationship building. Manipulation hides true motives. Influence states objectives clearly and finds alignment with others' interests. Consider the manager who needs cross-team collaboration. They could assign tasks based on their authority and demand compliance. This creates resentment and minimal effort. Instead, they invest time in understanding other teams' goals and constraints. They frame the collaboration in terms of shared success rather than personal need. They ask for input and adapt the approach based on feedback. The outcome includes better relationships and superior results. The difference becomes clear through examination. Manipulation exploits vulnerabilities and creates dependency. Influence builds capabilities and creates options. Manipulation achieves short-term gains at relationship cost. Influence achieves sustainable outcomes while strengthening connections. Manipulation relies on information asymmetry. Influence operates with transparency and honesty. Building influence systematically requires attention to three foundational elements. These pillars work together to create sustainable impact. Credibility forms the base that makes people listen. Relationships provide the network that amplifies your reach. Value creation gives others reasons to support your initiatives. Each pillar strengthens the others. Credibility establishes your right to be heard. People evaluate credibility through multiple signals. Your track record of delivering results matters most. Your expertise in relevant areas comes second. Your consistency and reliability build trust over time. Your transparency about limitations and challenges creates authenticity. Your willingness to acknowledge others' contributions demonstrates integrity. Credibility develops through demonstrated competence, not claimed expertise. You build it through small actions that compound over time. Meeting deadlines consistently creates reliability. Admitting mistakes quickly builds trust. Giving credit generously establishes collaborative intent. Asking for help when uncertain demonstrates wisdom. These behaviors create a credibility bank that pays compound interest. Relationships form the network through which influence flows. Strong relationships make your ideas travel faster and farther. They provide context and support when facing resistance. They offer different perspectives that improve your proposals. They create advocates who champion your initiatives when you're not in the room. Relationship building requires genuine curiosity about others' challenges and goals. You need to understand what matters to each person beyond their job descriptions. You must identify their pressures, motivations, and preferred working styles. You should find ways to help them achieve their objectives before asking for help with yours. You must maintain these connections even when you need nothing from them. Modern work relationships extend beyond immediate teams. You influence across departments, time zones, and seniority levels. Each relationship requires different approaches and investment levels. Close colleagues need regular contact and mutual support. Senior leaders need strategic insight and respectful challenge. Junior team members need encouragement and development opportunities. External partners need reliability and value creation. Maintaining this diverse network becomes a significant advantage. Value creation forms the reason others choose to support your initiatives. You must clearly articulate how your proposals benefit each stakeholder. This benefit goes beyond financial returns to include career advancement, skill development, and reduced stress. You identify how your work solves problems they're struggling with. You find ways to make their jobs easier or their results better. Value creation requires understanding others' priorities, not just your own. You research what success looks like for each stakeholder. You discover their constraints and pressures. You learn about their upcoming challenges and opportunities. You position your initiatives as solutions to their problems rather than additional demands on their time. The ethical framework underlying influence distinguishes it from manipulation. Ethical influence operates with transparency about intentions and methods. It respects others' autonomy and decision-making authority. It seeks win-win outcomes rather than zero-sum advantages. It builds long-term relationships rather than burning bridges for short-term gains. Ethical influence requires you to believe in the value you're promoting. You cannot ethically persuade others toward outcomes you don't support. You must honestly assess the benefits and risks of your proposals. You need to acknowledge potential downsides while emphasizing overall value. You should be willing to modify your approach based on legitimate concerns. Systematic influence development follows predictable patterns across successful professionals. They start by establishing credibility in their core competency areas. They invest in building relationships before they need them. They consistently identify and create value for others. They operate with integrity and transparency. They measure success through both outcomes and relationship quality. The most influential people you know probably don't seem charismatic or pushy. They likely seem thoughtful, reliable, and genuinely interested in others' success. They probably frame requests in terms of mutual benefit rather than personal need. They probably give away credit generously and accept responsibility readily. They probably maintain connections over time regardless of immediate needs. Your current approach to influence might rely on expertise alone or position when available. You might wait for formal authority before attempting major changes. You might view relationship building as political rather than professional. You might assume others will recognize your value without you articulating it clearly. These assumptions limit your impact and career progression. The alternative approach involves proactive credibility building, consistent relationship investment, and systematic value creation. You stop waiting for permission to influence outcomes. You start creating momentum through preparation and relationship development. You begin every initiative by identifying who needs to support it and why they should care. You track both task completion and relationship health as success metrics. Developing influence skills requires practice and feedback. You start small with low-stakes interactions. You experiment with different approaches and observe responses. You ask trusted colleagues for honest feedback about your influence attempts. You adjust your methods based on what works in your specific environment. You gradually build comfort with using influence techniques in increasingly challenging situations. The influence mindset shift creates immediate advantages. You start seeing opportunities where others see obstacles. You begin viewing resistance as information rather than rejection. You develop curiosity about what makes others tick rather than frustration with their perspectives. You recognize that most people want to help and be helpful when they understand the context. Apply this mindset shift today by identifying one person whose support you need for a current project. Research their goals and recent challenges. Find a way to help them before asking for their support. Frame your request in terms of shared success rather than your personal need. Notice how this approach changes both the response and the relationship quality. Choose one relationship to strengthen this week through genuine interest and value creation. Chapter 2. Your credibility bank account. You walk into meetings and people listen before you speak. Your proposals get fast-tracked. Other teams volunteer to help your initiatives. Senior leaders seek your input on important decisions. This scenario represents someone with a strong credibility bank account. They build trust systematically over time through consistent deposits of reliability, expertise, and value creation. Most professionals operate with minimal credibility reserves. They wonder why their ideas face resistance. They struggle to get buy-in for reasonable proposals. They feel frustrated when others dismiss their concerns or contributions. The problem isn't their ideas or their authority. The problem lies in their credibility balance. Credibility functions like a financial account. You make deposits through actions that prove your competence and character. You make withdrawals when you ask others to trust your judgment or commit resources to your initiatives. Strong credibility accounts allow you to influence outcomes even without formal power. Weak accounts force you to rely solely on position or persistent advocacy. 4 types of currency fill your credibility account. Each builds trust through different mechanisms. Combined, they create comprehensive credibility that makes influence effortless. Understanding how to earn and maintain each currency type transforms your ability to drive outcomes across teams. Expertise currency comes from demonstrated knowledge in relevant areas. People trust your judgment when you understand the subject matter deeply. This expertise must be visible and current. Outdated knowledge or theoretical understanding without practical application fails to build trust. Real expertise combines understanding with successful application. You earn expertise currency through focused learning and visible contribution. You stay current in your field through continuous education and practical application. You share knowledge generously through teaching and mentoring. You contribute original insights that help others solve problems. You admit when you don't know something and commit to finding answers. The key distinction lies in how expertise currency influences others. People listen to experts because they respect knowledge, not because they like the person. This currency builds initial credibility but requires consistent updating. Expertise without relationship building creates respect without affection. People follow experts reluctantly when the relationship is missing. Relationship currency flows from genuine connections with others. People trust recommendations from friends more than from strangers. They support initiatives from people they like and respect. They give the benefit of doubt to colleagues with whom they have positive histories. Relationship currency creates willingness before expertise currency creates respect. You earn relationship currency through authentic interest in others' success. You invest time in building genuine connections beyond work tasks. You remember important personal details and follow up on them. You celebrate others' wins and support them through challenges. You maintain relationships even when you need nothing from them. Relationship currency requires consistent effort and genuine care. People recognize insincerity quickly and withdraw trust accordingly. The best relationship builders focus on others' needs rather than their own. They create value before asking for support. They give freely of their time and expertise. They follow through on commitments consistently. Demonstration currency comes from visible proof of your claims and capabilities. People believe what they see more than what they hear. Your track record of delivering results matters more than your promises of future performance. Demonstration currency builds trust through evidence rather than explanation. You earn demonstration currency through consistent delivery of results that match your claims. You document and share success stories appropriately. You track metrics that prove your impact. You create case studies that others can reference. You build portfolios that showcase your capabilities. Demonstration currency works fastest when the results are impressive and recent. One major success creates immediate credibility. However, demonstration currency requires maintenance. Past successes lose influence over time without current validation. You need regular deposits to keep this currency valuable. Consistency currency builds through predictable behavior over time. People trust others who act according to stable values and methods. They rely on colleagues who deliver similar quality regardless of circumstances. They support leaders who maintain standards consistently rather than wavering based on pressure. You earn consistency currency through reliable performance and stable character. You maintain high standards regardless of audience or situation. You deliver similar quality whether you're being observed or working independently. You treat people consistently regardless of their level or influence. Consistency currency requires patience to build and vigilance to maintain. One major inconsistency can erase months of positive deposits. People remember failures more vividly than successes. Consistency demands that you avoid shortcuts and maintain ethics even when no one is watching. The interplay between these four currencies creates compound credibility. Each currency type strengthens the others. Expertise without relationships creates respect without influence. Relationships without expertise create affection without trust. Demonstrations without consistency create temporary credibility. Consistency without value creates reliability without innovation. High credibility professionals understand which currency to emphasize in different situations. They lean heavily on expertise currency when facing complex technical decisions. They rely on relationship currency when managing change initiatives. They use demonstration currency when advocating for resource allocation. They maintain consistency currency across all interactions. Building your credibility bank account requires systematic approach and long-term thinking. You start by assessing your current balance in each currency type. You identify which areas need strengthening. You create specific goals for earning deposits in weaker areas. You track your progress and adjust strategies based on results. The expertise currency development starts with identifying core competency gaps. You research what knowledge your stakeholders most value. You assess your current depth compared to industry standards. You create learning plans that target high-impact areas. You find opportunities to apply new knowledge in visible ways. Relationship currency building requires mapping your stakeholder network and understanding connection quality. You identify relationship gaps that limit your influence. You schedule regular touchpoints with key stakeholders. You find ways to help others succeed before asking for support. You maintain connections across different organizational levels and functions. Demonstration currency creation involves documenting your impact and finding showcase opportunities. You track metrics that prove your contributions. You create compelling narratives about your successes. You volunteer for high-visibility projects. You mentor others to multiply your demonstration currency. Consistency currency development focuses on maintaining standards across all interactions. You identify your core values and ensure your actions align with them. You establish quality standards and hold yourself accountable to them. You maintain ethical behavior even when it costs you short-term advantages. The maintenance challenge becomes increasingly important as your credibility grows. High credibility accounts require more frequent deposits to maintain their value. People expect more from proven performers. They forgive mistakes less readily. They scrutinize actions more carefully. Success breeds higher expectations and stricter evaluation. You develop credibility maintenance strategies that match your account balance. You create feedback systems that alert you to potential withdrawals. You invest in relationship building even when you're successful. You continue learning and demonstrating new capabilities. You maintain consistency standards regardless of external pressures. Account management also requires strategic withdrawals. You avoid making large credibility demands without building up reserves first. You time major influence attempts to coincide with recent deposits. You balance your asks with continued value creation. You monitor account health and make deposits when balances run low. The most successful professionals treat credibility as their most valuable professional asset. They invest in it consistently and protect it vigilantly. They understand that credibility compounds over time but can be lost quickly through poor choices. They make decisions based on long-term credibility impact rather than short-term convenience. Assess your current credibility account balance across the 4 currency types. Which areas show strong deposits? Which areas need immediate attention? What specific actions can you take this week to earn credibility currency in weaker areas? What credibility currency withdrawal will you need to make next week? And how will you prepare your account balance beforehand? Chapter 3. Bias blind spots and your advantage. You make dozens of decisions daily without realizing the shortcuts your brain takes. You assume others think rationally and logically. You believe good ideas naturally rise to the top. You expect people to evaluate information objectively and change their minds when presented with better alternatives. This mental model sets you up for frustration when working to influence decisions. Human decision-making follows predictable patterns that behavioral science has documented extensively. These patterns represent cognitive biases, systematic ways thinking deviates from pure logic. Understanding these biases gives you a significant advantage when seeking buy-in across teams. You can present information and frame requests in ways that work with natural thinking rather than against it. Most professionals remain unaware of how these biases shape reactions to their ideas. They present logical cases and wonder why emotional resistance emerges. They assume clarity equals agreement. They expect consistency from people who actually modify their views based on context and presentation. This disconnect between logical presentation and emotional response limits influence effectiveness. Authority bias affects decision-making in every organization. People defer to perceived expertise and seniority, even when evidence contradicts their recommendations. This bias works strongly in your favor when you establish credibility. It works against you when competing with higher-ranked individuals. You can leverage this bias by associating your proposals with respected sources and frameworks. The confirmation bias leads people to seek information that supports existing beliefs while avoiding contradictory evidence. People interpret ambiguous situations in ways that confirm their current views. This makes objective evaluation rare in practice. Your influence approach must account for this tendency by framing proposals as validation of existing successful practices rather than departure from proven methods. Availability bias causes recent and dramatic examples to carry disproportionate weight. People overestimate probabilities based on memorable experiences rather than statistical likelihood. This creates opportunities for influence through strategic use of examples and case studies. You can overcome this bias by providing multiple diverse examples rather than relying on single powerful stories. Social proof bias drives people to follow actions they perceive as normative within their reference groups. People adopt behaviors because others similar to them have adopted those behaviors. This creates powerful influence opportunities through careful selection of reference groups and peer examples. You can activate this bias by highlighting successful adoption by respected colleagues. The anchoring bias means initial information disproportionately influences subsequent judgments. People rely heavily on the first number or framework presented when evaluating alternatives. This makes your initial framing crucial for setting successful parameters. You can use anchoring strategically by presenting your preferred framework early in discussions. Loss-aversion bias causes people to weigh potential losses more heavily than equivalent potential gains. People prefer avoiding losses to acquiring equivalent gains by roughly a 2-to-1 ratio. This makes framing proposals in terms of avoiding problems more persuasive than emphasizing potential benefits. You can leverage this bias by highlighting what stakeholders might lose by not supporting your initiative. The status quo bias makes people prefer current arrangements even when better alternatives exist. People systematically underestimate the costs of maintaining current processes while overestimating the risks of change. This bias creates resistance to innovation that you must address through careful framing and gradual implementation approaches. The sunk cost fallacy leads people to continue poor decisions because of previously invested resources. Organizations continue failing projects because of unrecoverable investments. You can use this understanding to help stakeholders recognize when persistence becomes obstinacy and when strategic pivots represent wisdom rather than weakness. Understanding these biases changes how you craft influence strategies. You stop fighting human nature and start working with it. You frame proposals in language that activates helpful biases while minimizing harmful ones. You provide information in sequences that optimize impact rather than assuming logical flow matters most. The reciprocity bias creates obligation when people receive value before being asked for support. People feel psychologically compelled to return favors and help those who have helped them. This makes early value creation essential for successful influence. You build credit through helpful actions before requesting support for your initiatives. The commitment consistency bias drives people to maintain alignment between their public statements and private actions. People work to appear consistent with previously expressed values and commitments. You can leverage this bias by helping stakeholders articulate supporting principles before requesting specific actions that align with those principles. The scarcity bias makes people value resources more highly when they perceive limited availability. This creates urgency around proposals framed as time-sensitive opportunities. You can activate this bias legitimately by highlighting genuine resource constraints or competitive windows without manufactured artificial scarcity. Practical application requires understanding which biases affect each stakeholder most strongly. Different people respond to different influence triggers based on their roles, personalities, and current pressures. You identify the primary bias patterns for each stakeholder and adapt your approach accordingly. Finance professionals often respond strongly to anchoring and loss-aversion biases. They think in terms of numbers and risk mitigation. You frame proposals using precise financial projections and emphasize downside protection. You provide reference frameworks they recognize and respect. Marketing professionals often activate through social proof and availability biases. They think in terms of customer behavior and competitive positioning. You use case studies and peer examples. You frame proposals as market opportunities competitors might capture first. Engineering professionals often respond to authority and confirmation biases. They think in terms of technical standards and proven methodologies. You cite respected technical sources and frame proposals as validation of existing best practices rather than departures from standard approaches. Operations professionals often activate through status quo and sunk cost biases. They think in terms of efficiency and risk management. You emphasize process improvements that reduce current pain points while maintaining proven workflows. You frame changes as optimizations rather than transformations. High-stakes decisions activate multiple biases simultaneously. Stakeholders experience increased pressure and rely more heavily on mental shortcuts. Your influence approach must account for heightened bias sensitivity during critical moments. You prepare additional supporting materials and provide more reference points during these situations. Bias-aware influence requires careful timing and sequence. You introduce anchors early before competitors can set alternative frameworks. You provide social proof examples before asking for commitments. You activate loss aversion before presenting solution options. The order of information presentation significantly impacts decision outcomes. Ethical considerations remain paramount when working with cognitive biases. You never exploit biases to manipulate stakeholders toward outcomes that don't serve their interests. You focus on aligning their decisions with their stated goals and values. You provide complete information despite knowing some details might activate unhelpful biases. The most effective influence practitioners understand bias dynamics deeply enough to work with them naturally. They develop intuitive sense for which framing approaches work with different stakeholder types. They adapt their communication style to activate helpful bias patterns while maintaining transparency about their objectives and methods. Map the cognitive biases affecting your key stakeholders and craft one proposal this week using bias-aware framing techniques that align with their natural decision-making patterns. Chapter 4. Mapping your influence network. You stand outside the conference room watching colleagues file in for the quarterly planning meeting. Your critical initiative requires approval from this group, yet you've never mapped who influences whom. You recognize the formal decision-makers, but you sense invisible currents of power and opinion flowing between people. Without understanding these dynamics, you're flying blind into a political situation that will determine your project's fate. This scenario plays out repeatedly across organizations. You identify the official decision-makers and assume logical evaluation processes determine outcomes. In reality, influence flows through informal networks that operate alongside formal hierarchy. Some people wield disproportionate power through expertise, relationships, or strategic positioning. Others block progress through passive resistance or quiet opposition. Success depends on mapping these networks accurately and understanding how influence flows through them. Network mapping transforms vague political situations into strategic opportunities. You identify all stakeholders who affect your initiative's success, whether or not they hold formal authority. You understand their relationships, motivations, and communication preferences. You discover ally patterns and opposition clusters. Most importantly, you find the connectors, people who influence multiple key decision-makers and can carry your message efficiently. The influence network mapping process starts with comprehensive stakeholder identification. You begin with obvious decision-makers who control resources or approvals. You add opinion leaders who shape sentiment even without formal authority. You include downstream stakeholders who implement whatever gets approved. You account for upstream stakeholders whose prior decisions constrain current options. Hidden stakeholders often prove more influential than obvious ones. The senior engineer whose technical opinion carries weight far beyond their title. The operations manager who controls access to critical systems. The finance partner who understands budget dynamics intimately. The administrative assistant who controls calendars and information flow. These hidden influencers can accelerate or derail your initiative without ever speaking in meetings. You map relationships between stakeholders, not just their individual attributes. Some people have strong working relationships that amplify their joint influence. Others maintain cautious professional distance that limits collaborative opportunities. Some relationships are purely transactional, while others include personal loyalty and trust. Understanding relationship dynamics helps you identify coalition opportunities and potential resistance points. Influence flows differently across formal and informal networks. Formal influence operates through titles, budget authority, and organizational hierarchy. Informal influence emerges through expertise, relationships, and perceived wisdom. Both types matter for your initiative's success. You must understand how each operates and learn to navigate both effectively. Expertise-driven influence creates powerful pathways for technical or specialized initiatives. People with deep knowledge in relevant areas command attention regardless of their organizational level. These influencers often bridge formal hierarchy gaps by providing essential context and analysis. Your network mapping should identify technical experts whose support adds credibility to your proposal. Relationship-driven influence operates through personal connections and social networks. People with broad, positive relationships can gather support efficiently across different departments and levels. These connectors often serve as information brokers who understand sentiment across multiple stakeholder groups. Their endorsement carries weight because it signals broader approval. Access-driven influence comes from controlling critical information, resources, or decision points. These influencers may not seem powerful in obvious ways, yet they can block progress through administrative barriers or strategic information sharing. Your network map must account for these gatekeepers and understand how to work with them effectively. Political positioning creates influence through strategic alliances and careful reputation management. Some stakeholders excel at building coalitions around shared interests or concerns. They understand how to frame issues in ways that activate support networks. Their influence stems from relationship capital and strategic thinking rather than formal authority. You categorize stakeholders by their level of support and their degree of influence over your initiative's success. High support, high influence stakeholders become your champions and primary targets for early engagement. High support, low influence stakeholders provide credibility and information. Low support, high influence stakeholders require careful handling and potentially strategic accommodation. Low support, low influence stakeholders receive minimal attention unless they can be converted to supporters. Motivation analysis helps you understand why different stakeholders support or oppose your initiative. Financial motivations drive budget-oriented decision-makers who focus on cost-benefit analysis. Political motivations affect stakeholders concerned with organizational positioning and internal reputation. Technical motivations drive experts who prioritize solution quality and implementation feasibility. Personal motivations influence stakeholders focused on career advancement and skill development. Communication style mapping reveals how each stakeholder prefers to receive and process information. Some people respond to detailed analysis and comprehensive documentation. Others prefer concise summaries with clear action items. Visual learners need charts and diagrams. Quantitative thinkers require metrics and data. Emotional processors respond to stories and personal impact descriptions. Geographic and temporal considerations affect network dynamics in distributed organizations. Time zone differences create natural communication bottlenecks that some stakeholders exploit. Regional differences create cultural variations in decision-making styles and relationship-building approaches. Your network map must account for these practical constraints that influence how communication flows. Technology platforms shape how influence manifests in modern organizations. Email creates asynchronous influence opportunities with delayed response cycles. Chat platforms enable rapid coalition building around time-sensitive issues. Video calls simulate face-to-face influence dynamics across distance. Social platforms create informal information networks that can amplify or undermine formal proposals. Digital influence networks often operate faster than formal approval processes. Information spreads quickly through messaging apps and collaboration platforms. Sentiment shifts occur in hours rather than weeks. Your network mapping must account for both formal and digital influence channels and understand how they interact. Power mapping requires understanding both explicit and implicit influence structures. Explicit power comes from titles, budget authority, and organizational charts. Implicit power emerges from expertise, relationships, and strategic positioning. The most influential people often combine both types, but pure implicit power can be surprisingly effective for driving outcomes. You create visual network maps that show relationship patterns and influence flows. Simple organizational charts miss the nuanced relationships that actually drive decisions. Your maps should include connection lines that represent different types of relationships. Formal reporting, informal mentorship, project collaboration, social connections, and political alliances. Circular relationship patterns create coalition dynamics that cluster stakeholders into supportive or resistant groups. Linear relationships create sequential influence where each person affects the next. Hub-and-spoke patterns concentrate influence around key connectors. Understanding these patterns helps you identify the most efficient pathways for building support. Timing considerations affect how influence networks evolve around your initiative. Early-stage network mapping reveals baseline relationships and established patterns. Mid-process mapping shows how relationships shift as stakeholders form opinions and share information. Final-stage mapping identifies last-minute influence attempts and coalition changes that affect ultimate outcomes. Network maintenance becomes ongoing work rather than one-time analysis. Relationships evolve constantly through new projects, organizational changes, and personal development. Your network map requires regular updates to reflect current reality. You maintain relationships through regular contact and value creation regardless of immediate needs. Cross-functional mapping reveals influence patterns that span traditional departmental boundaries. Product decisions affect engineering resources and marketing timing. Engineering decisions impact customer support load and sales enablement. Understanding these cross-functional dependencies helps you identify natural allies and potential conflict points. Influence network mapping requires observation skills and systems thinking. You watch how people interact in meetings and informal settings. You notice who seeks whose input on different types of questions. You observe how information flows and where bottlenecks occur. You identify quiet influencers who shape decisions without speaking frequently. The practical application of network mapping transforms your approach to organizational influence. You stop treating influence attempts as random encounters with individual decision-makers. Instead, you approach influence strategically through mapped pathways that account for relationship dynamics and political realities. You identify the most efficient routes for building support and anticipate resistance patterns before they emerge. Your network map becomes a strategic tool for planning influence campaigns around major initiatives. You identify which stakeholders to engage first, how to frame your message for different audiences, and where to invest relationship-building resources for maximum impact. You understand which connectors can carry your message efficiently across stakeholder groups. Complete a comprehensive influence network map for your most important current initiative, including hidden stakeholders and relationship dynamics that affect outcomes. 3 months later, the same project moves forward smoothly because you engaged the right connectors early and built coalitions through strategic relationship investment rather than random advocacy. Closed questions create efficiency for gathering specific information but limit insight into underlying motivations. Do you have budget approval authority? Gets a simple yes or no. What concerns you about the budget implications of this project? Opens exploration of deeper worries and constraints. Strategic influence requires balancing efficient information gathering with deep understanding of stakeholder perspectives. Reflective listening techniques demonstrate understanding while encouraging further revelation. It sounds like the timeline concerns you because it overlaps with your Q3 deliverables, is that right? Shows you've listened carefully while giving the person opportunity to correct or elaborate. This approach builds trust and often reveals additional information they hadn't considered sharing initially. Strategic listeners pay attention to what gets avoided as much as what gets discussed. When someone changes subjects quickly or provides minimal detail about certain topics, they may be avoiding sensitive areas. Your influence approach must account for these hidden concerns even when people don't mention them directly. Indirect questioning about related topics can reveal unstated constraints. Nonverbal listening captures signals that often contradict verbal content. People may verbally agree while their body language suggests skepticism. They might express enthusiasm while their tone conveys doubt. Strategic listening integrates these nonverbal cues with verbal content to create accurate understanding of true positions and concerns. The strategic listener maintains dual awareness, understanding the speaker's perspective while monitoring your own influence objectives. You remain genuinely interested in their viewpoint while simultaneously analyzing how this information affects your influence strategy. This dual awareness prevents over-identification with their perspective that could undermine your effectiveness. Silence becomes a powerful strategic tool when used intentionally. After someone shares a concern, pausing before responding gives them opportunity to elaborate or reveal additional information. Strategic listeners use silence strategically rather than rushing to fill conversational gaps. The pause itself often generates valuable insight that speaking immediately would have prevented. Strategic listening builds influence through relationship development as much as information gathering. People feel heard and understood when you demonstrate sophisticated listening skills. This feeling creates positive association with you and increased willingness to support your initiatives. The act of being truly listened to is inherently influence-building regardless of the specific conversation content. Emotional validation represents a crucial strategic listening skill that often gets overlooked. Before addressing concerns logically, you acknowledge the emotions underlying them. I can hear that this timeline creates significant stress for your team, validates their feelings without agreeing with their position. This validation often reduces defensiveness and opens space for collaborative problem solving. Strategic listening requires reading between lines to identify unstated assumptions and hidden agendas. When someone objects to your budget request because the numbers don't work, they might actually be protecting their own budget priorities or signaling lack of authority to approve spending. Understanding these hidden dynamics changes how you approach the conversation. The compound effect of strategic listening appears over multiple interactions rather than individual conversations. People remember feeling heard and understood. They develop trust in your ability to grasp complex situations. They begin voluntarily sharing information that helps your initiative succeed. This reputation for thoughtful listening becomes a significant source of influence that amplifies all your other techniques. Strategic listening works particularly well in cross-functional situations where stakeholders operate with different priorities, languages, and success metrics. When finance, engineering, and marketing speak about the same project, they emphasize different aspects and worry about different risks. Strategic listening helps you understand each perspective without losing sight of your overall objectives. Practice strategic listening this week in 3 different types of conversations. One with a colleague, one with a stakeholder, and one with someone who typically disagrees with your positions. Pay attention to what you learn about their underlying motivations and concerns that wasn't apparent from initial statements. If you applied strategic listening to your next major influence attempt, what hidden concerns or motivations might you discover that would change how you approach the conversation? Chapter 6. Meeting Mastery Scripts. You walk into meetings armed with data, analysis, and logical arguments, yet watch your proposals get dismantled piece by piece. You have solid ideas that would benefit the organization, but somehow the conversation veers away from your key points. By the meeting's end, you're defending positions you never intended to take, and the decisions favor people who spoke louder rather than more persuasively. Meetings represent the primary battleground where influence gets tested and outcomes get determined. Most professionals treat meetings as information exchanges rather than influence opportunities. They prepare content but not conversation flows. They focus on what they'll say rather than how they'll guide discussion. This approach leaves influence to chance rather than treating meetings as strategic influence events that require preparation and skill. Meeting influence begins before anyone enters the room. You arrive with clear objectives that go beyond presenting information. You know which stakeholders need to hear which parts of your message. You understand how each person's priorities connect to your proposal. You identify potential allies and likely opponents. Most importantly, you prepare conversation bridges that connect your objectives to what matters to each participant. Opening moments set the tone for entire meetings. The first few statements establish frameworks that shape subsequent discussion. Your opening should accomplish 3 things: establish relevance, demonstrate understanding, and signal collaboration. You connect your topic to current organizational priorities. You acknowledge constraints and concerns that participants will mention. You frame the conversation around shared success rather than personal achievement. Opening script pattern. Thanks for making time to discuss topic. Given current priority/challenge, I wanted to explore how your proposal might help address shared concern. I've spoken with relevant stakeholders and understand key constraints. Let's look at how we can make this work for everyone's objectives. This approach signals that you've done homework and respect others' perspectives. It also plants seeds for collaboration that will matter later when decisions get made. The opening moves the conversation from evaluation to exploration, which favors well-prepared proposals. Introducing new ideas requires special handling in group settings. People resist proposals that feel imposed rather than co-created. Your introduction should invite input while maintaining momentum. You present core concepts and ask for initial reactions before diving into details. This creates ownership among participants and identifies concerns early enough to address them. New idea introduction script. I've been working on proposal and want to get your thoughts before we get too far down implementation details. The core concept is brief description. What I'm hoping to solve is shared problem. Before I dive into specifics, what questions or concerns come to mind? This script accomplishes multiple influence goals. It shows respect for participants' expertise by seeking early input. It identifies resistance patterns before you've invested heavily in details. It creates space for collaborative refinement rather than later opposition. Handling objections requires immediate acknowledgement followed by strategic reframing. People object to proposals for various reasons. Concerns about resources, timeline, technical feasibility, or political implications. Your response should validate their concern while redirecting toward solution-focused discussion. Objection handling patterns. Technical feasibility concerns. That's a fair concern about technical issue. I explored that with technical expert/team and found solution information. Are there other technical considerations I should factor in? Resource constraints. Resource availability is definitely a constraint I need to respect. What if we structured this as phased approach that minimized specific resource requirement while still achieving key benefit? Timeline pressures. Timeline sensitivity makes sense given their current priorities. Would alternative timeline/scheduling work better with your team's capacity? Political concerns. I understand the political dynamics around issue. How would you recommend I frame this to address specific political concern while still delivering key outcome? Each response pattern validates the objection without becoming defensive. They acknowledge legitimate concerns while providing information that addresses those concerns. They ask follow-up questions that deepen understanding rather than ending the conversation. Securing commitments during meetings requires precision and accountability. Vague agreement gets forgotten or reinterpreted. Clear commitments include specific actions, responsible parties, timelines, and follow-up mechanisms. You create these commitments through structured follow-up that participants can easily accept. Commitment securing script. To make sure we have clear next steps, here's what I'm hearing. Summarize agreement. Name. Will specific action, by date. I'll your action, by date. Let's check in follow-up mechanism. To ensure we're on track. Does that capture our agreement accurately? This script eliminates ambiguity by restating what was decided. It creates accountability through specific actions and dates. It establishes follow-up mechanisms that keep momentum alive. Most importantly, it asks for confirmation rather than assuming agreement. Redirecting off-topic conversations back to your objectives prevents meetings from wandering into unproductive territory. You accomplish this through bridge statements that acknowledge the current topic while connecting back to your priorities. Redirect script. That's an important point about current topic. It connects to what we're discussing because connection to your proposal. How do you think your proposal might address their point while still solving original problem? This approach validates their contribution while refocusing discussion on your objectives. It shows respect for their input while maintaining strategic direction. Managing dominant participants requires techniques that give others space while maintaining your influence. You can't control who speaks most, but you can create opportunities for quieter stakeholders to contribute and influence decisions. Managing dominant participants. That's a valuable perspective. Name. I'd also like to hear from quiet stakeholder about how this connects to their area of responsibility. This technique redirects attention respectfully while ensuring diverse input shapes decisions. Closing meetings with clear next steps prevents follow-up confusion and maintains momentum. Your closing should recap decisions, confirm commitments, and establish accountability mechanisms. Meeting closing script. To summarize what we've accomplished. Brief recap. Next steps are: recap commitments with dates. I'll send a follow-up email with specific documentation, by date. Please let me know if I've missed anything important. This closing creates clear accountability and follows up mechanisms while respecting everyone's time and contributions. Pre-meeting preparation significantly impacts meeting influence outcomes. You research participant priorities and recent challenges. You prepare talking points that connect to their interests. You identify ally relationships and potential coalition opportunities. Most importantly, you plan your opening and closing statements, knowing these moments create disproportionate influence on meeting outcomes. Practice meeting influence techniques in low-stakes situations before applying them to critical conversations. You refine your scripts through real-world application and feedback. You develop comfort with the language and timing that makes these techniques effective. Meeting mastery becomes a significant source of influence power when developed systematically. Choose one upcoming meeting where you need specific outcomes and practice these scripts during preparation and execution. Chapter 7. Written influence that gets results. You send an email that seems perfectly clear and logical, yet nothing happens. People don't respond. Decisions get delayed. Your ideas get ignored while others' proposals move forward. The problem isn't your logic or your recommendations. The problem is that written communication requires different influence techniques than face-to-face conversations. You need to master written influence strategies that cut through information overload and motivate action. Written communication dominates modern organizational influence attempts. Most influence conversations happen through email, documents, and collaborative platforms rather than in person. Yet most professionals use written communication as a passive medium, sharing information and hoping for appropriate responses. Written influence requires active persuasion techniques that work without verbal cues, body language, or immediate feedback loops. The written influence challenge becomes more complex every day. Inboxes overflow with messages competing for attention. Decision makers skim rather than read thoroughly. Documents get circulated but never discussed. Written proposals face evaluation by multiple stakeholders with different priorities and communication styles. Success requires written materials that grab attention quickly, maintain engagement throughout, and drive specific actions. The I2P framework provides a proven structure for influence-focused written communication. Attention gets your message opened and read. Interest maintains engagement through relevant content. Desire creates motivation for action by connecting to reader benefits. Action specifies exactly what you want readers to do. Proof provides evidence that supports your recommendations and reduces risk concerns. Attention in written communication means getting your message opened and initially reviewed. Subject lines determine whether busy people read your emails. Executive summaries determine whether documents get more than a cursory glance. Opening paragraphs decide whether readers continue past initial skepticism. You must earn the right to influence through compelling openings that connect to reader priorities immediately. Interest development requires content that feels immediately relevant to reader responsibilities and challenges. You speak their language, address their specific concerns, and frame information in contexts they understand. Interest grows when readers recognize their own problems and priorities reflected in your writing. You make them feel understood before asking for support. Desire creation happens when readers can visualize positive outcomes from supporting your recommendations. You paint clear pictures of benefits that matter to them personally and professionally. You connect your proposals to their success metrics and career advancement. You show how your initiatives solve problems they're struggling with rather than creating new demands on their time. Action specification removes ambiguity about what you need from readers. Vague requests get vague responses. Specific requests with clear deadlines and easy completion paths get acted upon. Your written influence succeeds when readers know exactly what to do, how to do it, and when to complete it. Proof provision addresses the risk management concerns that drive most organizational decisions. Readers need evidence that your recommendations are sound, your analysis is thorough, and your implementation plan is realistic. Proof can include case studies, expert endorsements, detailed analysis, or track records of similar successes. Email influence requires different approaches based on your relationship with the recipient and the type of influence you're seeking. Cold outreach emails must establish credibility and relevance quickly. Relationship emails can leverage existing trust and shared history. Follow-up emails require different strategies than initial contact emails. Status update emails need to maintain momentum and accountability. Cold outreach email pattern for stakeholder engagement. Subject: quick question about specific initiative/challenge they care about. Name: I've been following your work on specific project/initiative, and I'm impressed by specific achievement/recent development. I'm working on brief description that might be relevant to their area of responsibility/interest. Would you have 15 minutes this week for a quick conversation? I'd love to learn more about specific question that shows genuine interest. Thanks for considering. Your name. This pattern accomplishes multiple influence goals. The subject line suggests value rather than asking for something. The opening acknowledges their specific work and achievements. The brief description positions your initiative as potentially helpful to them. The specific question demonstrates genuine interest and research. The time request remains reasonable and respectful. Relationship email pattern for requesting support. Subject: following up on our conversation about previous topic. Name: thanks for the time you spent discussing previous topic last week. Your insight about specific point they made helped me refine your current initiative/project. I'm moving forward with specific action, and wanted to get your input on how this connects to their area/expertise. Would you be open to specific request? I think your perspective would strengthen specific outcome significantly. Thanks for considering. Your name. This pattern references previous interactions to build on existing relationship capital. It shows you've processed their input and valued their contribution. It positions your request as benefiting from their expertise rather than just needing their approval. Document structure for influence follows predictable patterns that facilitate reader engagement and decision-making. Executive summaries must stand alone and capture essential information for time-pressed decision-makers. Problem statements must establish urgency and importance without creating unnecessary alarm. Solution sections must provide clear recommendations with implementation roadmaps. Risk sections must acknowledge challenges while demonstrating mitigation strategies. Executive Summary Template for Influence Documents. Executive Summary. Project/initiative name. Situation. Brief description of current challenge/opportunity. Recommendation. Specific action being requested. Benefits. Key outcomes for organization and stakeholders. Timeline. Implementation schedule with key milestones. Resources. Required budget, personnel, or other support. Risks and mitigation. Potential challenges and solutions. Next steps. Immediate actions required from leadership. This template structure enables busy executives to understand your proposal quickly and make informed decisions about whether to support your initiative. Follow-up email patterns maintain accountability and momentum between written communication and actual implementation. Follow-up emails should reference previous agreements, confirm commitments, and establish clear next steps. They should maintain positive tone while ensuring clarity about responsibilities and deadlines. Follow-up confirmation email. Subject. Confirming our agreement on project/initiative. Name. Wanted to confirm our conversation about specific topic/decision from date. To recap. Brief summary of agreement/decision. Next steps are specific commitments with responsible parties and dates. All your commitments, by date. You mentioned you would their commitments, by date. Let's touch base on follow-up mechanism. To ensure we're tracking well. Thanks for the collaboration on this. Your name. This pattern creates accountability through written confirmation of verbal agreements. It reduces ambiguity about who is doing what by when. It maintains collaborative tone while ensuring clarity about expectations. Decision-making documents require different structure than status updates or information sharing. Decision documents must present clear options with pros and cons, recommend specific courses of action, and anticipate likely questions or concerns. They must provide sufficient context for readers to make informed decisions without overwhelming them with unnecessary detail. Decision Memo Template. Decision Memo. Initiative/project name. Background. Context and current situation. Options considered. Primary alternatives with brief descriptions. Analysis. Comparison of options against key criteria. Recommendation. Specific recommended option with rationale. Implementation plan. Timeline, resources, and key milestones. Risks and mitigation. Potential challenges and planned responses. Decision required. Specific action needed from decision maker. This template structure guides decision makers through logical evaluation process while clearly stating your preferred recommendation and supporting rationale. Visual elements enhance written influence when used strategically. Charts and graphs can communicate complex information quickly. Infographics can make process flows or system designs more accessible. Bullet lists can improve readability for skimmers. Headings and subheadings can guide attention to key points. However, visual elements must serve the content rather than distracting from it. Written influence success depends on matching your communication style to reader preferences and decision-making processes. Some stakeholders prefer detailed analysis with comprehensive supporting evidence. Others prefer concise summaries with clear recommendations and minimal complexity. Some read thoroughly before making decisions. Others skim for key points and make initial judgments quickly. Your written influence skills improve through deliberate practice and systematic feedback collection. You track which email approaches generate responses and which get ignored. You notice which document structures facilitate decisions and which create confusion. You adapt your writing style based on stakeholder preferences and organizational culture. You develop templates that work for your most common influence scenarios. What written influence approach will you test this week with a specific stakeholder? And how will you measure whether it achieves your desired outcome? Chapter 8. Negotiating without leverage. You enter with no title power, no budget control, and no senior sponsor. The other side holds the resources. Your job is still to land a good deal. This is normal in cross-functional work. Rank matters less than influence. Shift from force to persuasion. When you understand how decisions are made, you can build leverage before any bargaining starts. 1. Redefine leverage for influence work. Leverage is more than titles or money. Map 4 quiet sources before every negotiation. A. Relational leverage. Trust and goodwill. People help people they trust. B. Informational leverage. Data, insight, or hard-won context others do not have. C. Time leverage. Control of milestones, deadlines, and pacing. D. BATNA leverage. Your best alternative if no deal is reached. Knowing it raises confidence. Ask yourself, who already trusts me and why? What information do I hold that they need? Which dates or phases can I influence? If this deal dies, what will I do next? 2. Move from positions to interests. A position sounds like this. We need 3 engineers in Q4. Interests live underneath. Risk, delivery, quality, visibility, customer impact. Use short why and what questions. What problem does this solve for your team? If we can reach the same outcome with fewer resources, what changes for you? What else is pulling your time this month? When interests surface, positions become flexible. Options multiply. 3. Create value before you ask. Reciprocity is real. Give first. Keep it small and useful. Share a brief analysis that clarifies their decision. Hand over a template or checklist that saves them time. Offer a bite-sized assist inside your skill set. This reframes you from requester to partner. Defenses drop. 4. Prepare bias-aware scripts. People decide with patterns, not only logic. Prime the patterns. Anchoring. Set the first number or date. Say, we plan to add 1 engineer for the next sprint. That gives enough capacity to hit the October 15 deliverable. Loss-aversion. Highlight the cost of inaction. Say, if we do not lock this support now, next quarter's rollout slips, and we risk losing 3 high-value prospects. Social proof, show it worked next door. Say, marketing used this same approach and shipped their launch on time. 5. Present options with objective criteria. Shift the conversation from preference to standards. Use cost, time, quality, risk. Read options out loud. Option A. Cost is 3 full-time equivalent weeks. Timeline 4 weeks. Risk low. Key benefit is meeting the launch date. Option B. Cost is 5 full-time equivalent weeks. Timeline 6 weeks. Risk medium. Key benefit is extra testing and higher quality. Invite them to add criteria. Co-creating the yardstick makes agreement easier. 6. Handle objections with a 4-step de-escalation. Objections are information. Treat them that way. Step 1. Acknowledge. I hear you. Budget is tight this quarter. Step 2. Clarify. Which cost line creates the most pressure? Step 3. Reframe. If we phase the work, we drop upfront spend by 30% and still hit the critical milestone. Step 4. Confirm. Does that address the budget worry? 7. Lock agreements in writing. Memories fade. Send a concise recap. Subject. Agreement summary for project name. Body. Per today's discussion, you will allocate 2 engineer weeks by October 1 to support the data pipeline. I will deliver design specs by September 20. We will review both on September 25. Please confirm this matches your understanding. Protect the relationship. Close with respect and flexibility. Say, thanks for working through this. I value the collaboration. Say, if something changes on your side, tell me and we will adjust. 9. Practice, measure and iterate. After each negotiation, score 3 items. Did we receive the resources we agreed? Relationship quality 1 to 5, up or down. Which bias framing helped, which did not? Refine your scripts. Influence improves with deliberate reps. Quick checklist. Map relational, informational, time and BATNA leverage. Surface interests with simple why and what questions. Give value early to trigger reciprocity. Anchor first, frame losses, point to social proof. Use objective criteria, then document the deal, then protect the relationship. 1-minute practice. Write one anchoring line, one loss frame, and one social proof line for your current project. Read them out loud. Edit until they sound natural in a hallway conversation. Chapter 9. High-stakes influence moments. You stand outside the executive conference room 30 minutes before the critical budget review. Your initiative will either receive funding for the next phase or get shelved indefinitely. 3 senior vice presidents sit inside making decisions that affect your career trajectory and team members' job security. The CEO has already expressed skepticism about the project's ROI. The CFO raised concerns about resource allocation. Your sponsor, the VP of Product, looks stressed and uncertain. This moment will define whether 6 months of work results in breakthrough progress or quiet cancellation. High-stakes influence moments compress months of relationship building, credibility development, and strategic positioning into single conversations. These moments determine whether your initiatives receive the resources and support they need to succeed or get relegated to the graveyard of good ideas that never got proper backing. Most professionals approach these moments with the same preparation they use for routine meetings, leaving critical outcomes to chance rather than strategy. High-stakes moments share distinctive characteristics that require specialized influence approaches. Multiple decision-makers evaluate your proposal simultaneously, creating complex political dynamics. Time pressure limits discussion depth, forcing you to communicate crucial information quickly and persuasively. Stakes extend beyond the immediate decision to affect your reputation, career progression, and team morale. The room contains hidden agendas and competing priorities that may not align with your objectives. Successful navigation of high-stakes influence moments depends on preparation that goes far beyond content development. You need to understand the specific pressures each decision-maker faces, the political dynamics between participants, and the criteria they will use to evaluate your proposal. You must anticipate objections and resistance patterns that emerge under pressure. Most importantly, you need to frame your initiative in ways that serve each stakeholder's primary interests rather than just your own objectives. The preparation phase begins with comprehensive stakeholder pressure analysis. You identify what success and failure mean for each decision-maker in this specific context. You understand their current challenges, upcoming deadlines, and political concerns that will influence their evaluation. You research recent organizational changes, strategic initiatives, and budget priorities that affect how they perceive your proposal's value. Budget decisions involve different evaluation criteria than product decisions or strategic planning discussions. Financial stakeholders prioritize ROI, risk mitigation, and resource efficiency. Product leaders focus on market impact, competitive positioning, and customer value delivery. Operations managers emphasize implementation feasibility, timeline reliability, and operational risk. Your proposal must demonstrate value across all relevant criteria simultaneously. Political dynamics within the room often matter more than the logical strength of your proposal. You identify which stakeholders have pre-existing relationships and how those connections influence their willingness to support initiatives. You understand power dynamics that might create alliance opportunities or resistance patterns. You recognize which participants serve as opinion leaders whose support or opposition will influence others. Content preparation for high-stakes moments requires ruthless prioritization and strategic framing. You craft opening statements that establish context and relevance within 60 seconds. You prepare concise value propositions that connect to each stakeholder's priorities. You develop supporting evidence that addresses likely objections without appearing defensive. Most importantly, you practice delivering complex information under time pressure without losing clarity or persuasiveness. The prep framework, adapted for high-stakes influence moments, provides systematic preparation. Prepare by researching stakeholder pressures and political dynamics thoroughly. Prime by building awareness and credibility in the weeks leading up to the meeting. Perform using proven scripts and techniques under pressure. Post by following up strategically and maintaining momentum. High-stakes moments activate powerful cognitive biases that you can leverage strategically. Status quo bias makes people prefer current investments over new initiatives, especially when budgets are tight. You counter this by framing your proposal as continuation of successful programs, rather than entirely new expenditures. Authority bias makes people defer to senior voices in the room, requiring you to align your message with respected decision-makers' priorities. Confirmation bias leads people to seek information that supports existing beliefs, making early framing crucial for setting evaluation parameters. Risk assessment becomes especially important in high-stakes environments where failures have significant consequences. Decision-makers weigh implementation risk, opportunity cost, and political risk alongside potential benefits. Your proposal must acknowledge and address these concerns explicitly rather than treating them as secondary issues. Risk mitigation strategies demonstrate thorough thinking and respect for stakeholders' legitimate concerns. Time management within high-stakes conversations requires precise pacing and strategic interruption techniques. You cannot let important points get buried under extended discussions of minor details. You need methods for redirecting conversations back to your key value propositions when they wander off track. You must balance thoroughness with efficiency to ensure your crucial messages receive adequate attention. Emotional regulation becomes critical when pressure and stakes are high. You need techniques for maintaining calm confidence when facing aggressive questioning or apparent hostility. You require strategies for handling personal attacks without becoming defensive or losing focus on your objectives. Most importantly, you need methods for managing your own stress responses so they don't undermine your influence effectiveness. Strategic silence works powerfully in high-stakes moments when used intentionally. After making a crucial point, pausing allows the information to sink in rather than rushing to fill conversational gaps. Strategic silence can also signal confidence and let others reveal additional information that helps your position. You must distinguish between productive silence and awkward gaps that others will rush to fill. Closing statements in high-stakes conversations require explicit commitment securing rather than assuming positive outcomes. You need techniques for getting clear yes or no decisions when stakeholders attempt to delay or avoid committing. You require approaches for creating accountability mechanisms that maintain momentum between this meeting and implementation. You must establish follow-up processes that prevent decisions from getting lost or reversed. The aftermath of high-stakes moments often determines whether brief success translates into long-term implementation. Immediate follow-up prevents decision drift and maintains urgency for next steps. Relationship maintenance with key stakeholders ensures continued support as implementation challenges emerge. Success documentation helps future influence attempts by building evidence of your capability to deliver results. High-stakes influence moments represent peak testing of all influence skills you've developed. They require preparation, credibility, relationship capital, strategic thinking, and communication excellence working together under pressure. These moments separate professionals who drive outcomes from those who hope for them. Mastery of high-stakes influence transforms your ability to secure critical support for initiatives that matter. Prepare for your next high-stakes influence moment by researching stakeholder pressures, practicing under time constraints, and testing your opening and closing statements with trusted colleagues who can provide honest feedback. 6 months later, that same budget review results in full funding and expanded scope because you arrived with comprehensive preparation, bias-aware framing, and relationship capital that converted initial skepticism into strong support. Chapter 10. The Prep Cycle in Practice. You need a repeatable system that transforms influence attempts from reactive chaos into strategic success. This system must work across different situations, budget requests, project approvals, cross-team collaboration, without requiring constant reinvention of your approach. The prep cycle, prepare, prime, perform, post, provides this systematic framework for influence that you can apply to any scenario where you need buy-in without authority. The prep cycle emerges from consistent patterns among successful influencers across industries. They don't wing high-stakes conversations or rely on inspiration for critical negotiations. They systematically prepare for every important interaction, build momentum through early awareness, execute using proven techniques, and follow up strategically to maintain gains. This disciplined approach turns influence from sporadic success into reliable capability. Prepare. Building strategic foundation. Preparation begins weeks before your actual influence attempt. You research stakeholders thoroughly to understand their pressures, priorities, and preferred working styles. You map their influence networks to identify allies, opponents, and potential connectors. You analyze their organization's current challenges and strategic initiatives that relate to your proposal. You develop multiple scenarios for how the conversation might unfold and prepare responses for each potential path. Preparation includes building your credibility reserves specifically for this interaction. You schedule earlier meetings with key stakeholders to demonstrate competence and gather intelligence. You deliver small wins that create positive association with your work. You share relevant insights or resources that position you as valuable rather than demanding. These early deposits make your major request more likely to succeed. Content development involves crafting value propositions that connect to each stakeholder's specific interests rather than generic benefits. You identify the problems they're struggling with that your initiative could solve. You research their success metrics and frame your proposal in terms of improving those numbers. You find examples of similar successes in comparable organizations and prepare case studies that resonate with their industry context. Risk assessment and mitigation planning protects against common failure points. You identify potential objections and develop responses that address legitimate concerns without appearing defensive. You prepare backup options in case your primary request gets rejected. You create contingency plans for political resistance or resource constraints. Preparation turns unexpected challenges into manageable obstacles. Timeline planning ensures appropriate pacing for relationship building and awareness development. You schedule influence activities over weeks rather than days to avoid appearing transactional. You identify key milestones that create natural checkpoints for relationship reinforcement. You plan preparation activities that compound over time rather than requiring intensive bursts of activity before each interaction. Prime. Creating favorable conditions. Priming builds awareness and positive associations with your initiative before you make your formal request. This phase operates behind the scenes, subtly shaping how people perceive and discuss your proposal. Effective priming makes your eventual ask feel like natural progression rather than sudden demand. Early mention strategy involves bringing up your initiative casually in appropriate contexts before formal presentation. You reference it as ongoing work rather than future possibility. You share progress updates that demonstrate competence and momentum. You seek input on related topics that naturally leads to your proposal. This creates mental familiarity that makes formal discussion feel less threatening. Reference group activation leverages social proof to make your initiative appear normative and desirable. You highlight how similar teams have benefited from comparable approaches. You share success stories from respected organizations or industries. You mention how other companies are solving similar challenges using methods related to your proposal. Reference groups create normative pressure without direct persuasion. Authority alignment connects your proposal to respected frameworks and initiatives within your organization. You reference strategic priorities that your initiative supports. You cite company values that your approach exemplifies. You align your proposal with existing successful programs rather than positioning it as departure from proven methods. Authority alignment makes your initiative feel safer and more legitimate. Relationship reinforcement during priming focuses on strengthening connections with key stakeholders before you need their support. You remember important details from previous conversations and follow up on them. You offer assistance with their initiatives unrelated to your project. You maintain regular contact that feels genuine rather than transactional. Strong relationships make people more willing to support your requests when the time comes. Perform. Strategic execution under pressure. Performance phase brings all your preparation and priming together in the actual influence interaction. This is where your systematic approach gets tested against real-time dynamics. Effective performance requires adaptation to unfolding circumstances while maintaining strategic focus on your objectives. Opening moments set the tone for entire interactions and must accomplish multiple goals simultaneously. You establish relevance by connecting to current priorities that participants care about. You demonstrate competence through concise, accurate summary of key information. You signal collaborative intent by framing discussion around mutual benefit rather than personal achievement. Strong openings create momentum that carries through challenging moments. Conversation navigation involves guiding discussion toward your prepared talking points while appearing responsive to participant input. You acknowledge contributions while redirecting toward your key messages. You ask questions that surface hidden concerns while advancing your objectives. You manage dominant participants to ensure balanced input without creating conflict. Strategic navigation maintains focus while preserving relationship quality. Objection handling requires immediate acknowledgement followed by strategic reframing rather than defensive responses. You validate legitimate concerns without conceding your position. You provide information that addresses underlying worries while maintaining momentum toward your goal. You ask follow-up questions that explore root causes rather than just symptoms. Skilled objection handling turns resistance into collaborative problem-solving. Commitment securing happens through clear, specific agreements that participants can easily accept. You restate decisions to ensure mutual understanding. You create accountability mechanisms that maintain momentum after the interaction ends. You establish follow-up processes that prevent drift or reversal of agreements. Precise commitment securing transforms verbal agreements into implementable plans. Time management during performance ensures crucial messages receive adequate attention despite competing priorities. You prioritize key points that must be covered regardless of how conversations develop. You use transitional statements to return to important topics when discussions wander. You maintain awareness of meeting flow to avoid running out of time before securing essential commitments. Post. Cementing gains and building momentum. Post-performance activities determine whether temporary success translates into lasting implementation and relationship strengthening. Most influence attempts fail not during execution but due to poor follow-up that allows momentum to dissipate. Systematic post-performance activities maintain urgency and accountability while reinforcing relationships. Immediate follow-up prevents decision drift through prompt confirmation and documentation. You send summary emails that restate key agreements and next steps within hours of the interaction. You schedule follow-up meetings while enthusiasm remains high. You begin implementation steps immediately to demonstrate commitment and maintain forward motion. Rapid follow-up converts conversational agreements into actionable plans. Relationship maintenance during post-performance focuses on strengthening connections created during the influence attempt. You acknowledge participants' contributions publicly when appropriate. You provide progress updates that demonstrate how their support contributed to success. You ask for their input on implementation decisions to maintain their investment in outcomes. Strong relationship maintenance builds foundation for future influence attempts. Success documentation captures lessons learned and evidence of effectiveness for future reference. You track metrics that demonstrate the value created through your influence attempt. You create case studies that others can reference when evaluating similar initiatives. You document which techniques worked best in your specific context to refine your approach. Systematic documentation improves future influence attempts and builds organizational credibility. Long-term relationship building transforms single influence wins into sustained collaborative partnerships. You continue providing value to people who supported your initiative. You look for opportunities to return favors and strengthen connections over time. You maintain regular contact that feels genuine rather than opportunistic. Long-term relationship building creates network effects that amplify your influence reach. The prep cycle becomes increasingly powerful through repeated application and refinement. Each cycle teaches you what works in your specific organizational context and what requires adjustment. You develop intuition for when to emphasize different phases based on situation complexity and stakeholder characteristics. Consistent application transforms prep from conscious system into natural capability that drives results across all your influence attempts. Analyze your upcoming influence attempt through the prep cycle framework. Which phase needs the most attention given your current relationships with key stakeholders and the complexity of your desired outcome? Chapter 11. Building long-term influence relationships. You achieve a significant win through exceptional influence skills, securing budget approval, timeline commitment, and stakeholder alignment for your critical initiative. 6 months later, when you need support for a new project, you start from zero with the same people who enthusiastically backed your previous proposal. This pattern repeats because most influence focuses on immediate transactions rather than long-term relationship building. You need sustainable approaches that compound your influence over time rather than requiring repeated starts. Long-term influence relationships transform sporadic wins into consistent support. These relationships operate on trust, mutual benefit, and shared history rather than single negotiations. They create an ongoing expectation of collaboration rather than one-time requests. Most importantly, they position you as someone others seek out for partnerships rather than someone who shows up when needing favors. The relationship-first mindset distinguishes long-term influencers from transactional requesters. They invest in understanding others' goals, challenges, and career aspirations regardless of immediate needs. They find ways to contribute value before asking for support. They maintain connections through regular contact and genuine interest, rather than disappearing between influence attempts. This approach creates relationship capital that compounds over time. Trust development forms the foundation of lasting influence relationships. Trust emerges through demonstrated reliability, transparent communication, and consistent follow-through on commitments. People trust collaborators who deliver on promises, acknowledge mistakes quickly, and maintain confidentiality when appropriate. Trust grows through small actions repeated consistently rather than grand gestures performed occasionally. Credibility maintenance becomes more important as relationships deepen. Established relationships carry higher expectations than new connections. People forgive less readily and scrutinize more carefully when they know you well. Your credibility mistakes matter more because they affect relationships you've invested years building. Long-term influence requires sustained excellence rather than occasional peak performance. Value creation shifts from project-specific benefits to career-long support. Long-term partners help each other navigate organizational changes, pursue advancement opportunities, and solve problems that span multiple initiatives. They share information that affects each other's success. They provide introductions and recommendations that open new possibilities. They create opportunities for mutual benefit rather than zero-sum transactions. Network effects amplify long-term influence beyond direct relationships. Strong relationships create connections to additional stakeholders through introductions and recommendations. Each successful collaboration adds credibility and trust that makes the next partnership easier to establish. Long-term influence networks grow exponentially through compound relationship building rather than linear connection accumulation. The reciprocity principle operates powerfully in long-term relationships through expected return rather than immediate exchange. Partners invest in relationships knowing that support will be available when needed without calculating exact equivalency. This creates more flexible and sustainable collaboration patterns than transactional approaches that require immediate value matching. Time horizon extension changes influence strategy fundamentally. Long-term thinking prioritizes relationship quality over immediate outcomes. It accepts short-term costs for long-term relationship strengthening. It views setbacks as opportunities for relationship testing rather than immediate failures. This perspective enables strategies that seem counterintuitive in short-term contexts but prove highly effective over extended periods. Communication patterns in long-term relationships emphasize ongoing dialogue rather than request-driven interaction. Successful influencers maintain regular contact with key stakeholders through natural conversation rather than business-only communication. They share relevant information, ask thoughtful questions, and demonstrate genuine interest in others' success. This creates relationships that feel authentic rather than purely instrumental. Boundary management becomes crucial as relationships deepen and expectations increase. Long-term partners must balance availability with personal sustainability. They need systems for managing relationship maintenance that don't become overwhelming. They must maintain professional boundaries while preserving personal connections that make collaboration enjoyable and effective. Career navigation benefits significantly from long-term influence relationships. Trusted colleagues provide guidance during transitions, recommend you for opportunities, and serve as references when pursuing advancement. These relationships often prove more valuable for career progression than formal performance evaluations or organizational charts. They create career insurance and acceleration opportunities that extend far beyond specific projects. Organizational change becomes navigable through strong relationship networks. Long-term influence relationships provide information flow during reorganizations and leadership transitions. They offer perspective and support during uncertainty. They create stability through trusted connections that persist despite structural changes. This network resilience protects your influence capacity during volatile periods. Mentorship relationships represent particularly powerful long-term influence dynamics. Both mentors and ments develop long-term influence through these partnerships. Mentors gain fresh perspectives and expanded networks through ments' activities. Ments receive guidance and advocacy from experienced professionals. These relationships create mutual influence that benefits both parties over extended periods. Professional reputation management requires long-term perspective and consistent attention. Your reputation builds through repeated interactions with many stakeholders over time. It reflects not just your technical competence but your collaborative approach, ethical standards, and reliability under pressure. Reputation influences how people respond to your influence attempts before you even make requests. Digital relationship management becomes increasingly important in distributed work environments. Long-term relationships require intentional maintenance across time zones and communication platforms. You need strategies for maintaining personal connection through virtual channels. You must adapt your relationship-building approaches to hybrid and remote work realities. Seasonal relationship patterns emerge as organizations cycle through planning, execution, and review periods. Long-term influencers recognize these cycles and adapt their relationship strategies accordingly. They invest in relationship strengthening during slower periods and maintain momentum during busy seasons. They understand how organizational rhythms affect relationship-building opportunities. Legacy thinking transforms how you approach influence relationships. You consider not just immediate benefits but how your approach affects others' willingness to collaborate with you over time. You invest in relationships that will matter for years rather than just current project cycles. This creates sustainable influence capacity rather than ephemeral wins. Practice long-term relationship building by identifying one key stakeholder and committing to regular value-creating contact for the next 12 months, regardless of whether you need their support for anything specific. Chapter 12. Scaling your influence across teams. Your influence works brilliantly within your immediate team and with stakeholders who know your work. You secure resources, timelines, and buy-in consistently through the techniques you've mastered. Yet, organizational challenges rarely stay contained within neat boundaries. You need to drive outcomes that span multiple teams, departments, and levels of hierarchy. Single-person influence reaches natural limits when facing cross-functional initiatives or enterprise-wide changes. You must learn to scale your influence systematically across organizational boundaries without burning out or losing effectiveness. Scaling influence requires moving from individual excellence to systematic capability development. You stop being the only person who can influence outcomes in your domain. You start creating systems, processes, and relationships that multiply your impact far beyond what any single person could achieve alone. This transformation shifts your role from individual contributor to influence ecosystem builder. The scalability challenge emerges when your initiatives require coordination across multiple teams with different priorities, languages, and success metrics. Your influence with engineering doesn't automatically transfer to finance. Your relationships with product managers don't guarantee collaboration with operations. Your credibility in your current role doesn't extend to other departments. You need systematic approaches for building influence capacity across diverse stakeholder groups. Multiplication strategies focus on creating additional influence points rather than simply increasing your personal capacity. You develop allies who can carry your message within their own networks. You build systems that maintain momentum even when you're not directly involved. You teach influence techniques to others who share your objectives. You create frameworks that other teams can adopt independently. Ally development represents the most immediate scalability opportunity. You identify individuals within key stakeholder groups who share your objectives or face similar challenges. You invest in these relationships beyond immediate project needs. You provide them with information, resources, and support that helps them succeed independently. You create informal coalitions that amplify your influence across organizational boundaries. Effective allies operate as influence amplifiers rather than simple messengers. They understand your objectives and can articulate the benefits in language that resonates with their own networks. They have credibility within their groups that you lack. They can navigate political dynamics more effectively than outsiders. Most importantly, they become independently motivated to support your initiatives rather than just doing you favors. The ally development process begins with network mapping that extends beyond your immediate stakeholders. You identify people who share your goals, have influence within target groups, and maintain collaborative relationships with multiple stakeholders. You look for connectors, individuals who span different departments and have broad positive relationships. You find potential allies who have already faced and solved similar challenges. Relationship building with potential allies requires different approaches than direct influence attempts. You focus on understanding their challenges and providing value before asking for support. You share insights that help them succeed regardless of your immediate projects. You maintain regular contact that feels genuine rather than opportunistic. You create opportunities for collaboration that demonstrate the benefits of working together. Strategic alliance creation involves formal and informal partnerships that multiply influence systematically. Informal alliances emerge through shared interests and mutual benefit. Formal partnerships might include joint initiatives, shared resources, or collaborative problem-solving groups. Both types require ongoing investment to maintain effectiveness as organizational dynamics shift. Teaching influence skills to others creates multipliers who can implement your approaches independently. You transfer not just specific techniques but the underlying mindset and analytical frameworks that make influence sustainable. You help others develop their own credibility, relationship networks, and bias-aware approaches. You create influence culture within your sphere of responsibility. The teaching approach focuses on practical application rather than theoretical instruction. You demonstrate influence techniques in real situations and explain your reasoning afterward. You provide frameworks that others can adapt to their specific contexts. You offer feedback and coaching rather than just providing answers. You celebrate successes and learn from failures collaboratively. Capacity building within your team multiplies influence across all projects simultaneously. Team members who develop strong influence skills can secure resources and buy-in for their initiatives independently. They can represent team interests in cross-functional discussions. They can build relationships that benefit the entire team, not just individual projects. This creates compounding returns on influence investment. System building focuses on creating processes that maintain influence momentum regardless of individual availability. Standard templates for proposals, stakeholder analysis, and follow-up reduce the effort required for each new influence attempt. Regular relationship maintenance systems ensure connections remain strong over time. Documented playbooks help others replicate successful approaches. Organizational influence frameworks translate individual techniques into systematic approaches that entire departments can adopt. These frameworks provide structure for influence attempts that work across different scenarios and stakeholder groups. They include templates, scripts, and decision trees that guide influence efforts. They establish metrics for measuring influence effectiveness and identifying improvement opportunities. Culture change around influence transforms it from individual skill to organizational norm. When influence becomes part of how work gets done rather than just something certain people do well, the entire organization becomes more effective. People start treating influence as a professional competency rather than political maneuver. Collaboration improves because everyone understands and applies influence principles. Cultural transformation requires leadership modeling and consistent reinforcement of influence values. Senior leaders must demonstrate collaborative approaches and value diverse perspectives. Performance evaluation should include relationship building and cross-functional collaboration. Success stories should highlight influence achievements alongside individual accomplishments. Digital influence systems help scale relationship management across large networks and distributed teams. CRM systems can track relationship development and maintenance activities. Social platforms can facilitate ongoing connection with stakeholders across geographic boundaries. Collaboration tools can enable coordinated influence efforts across multiple locations and time zones. Influence measurement becomes more complex but more valuable when scaling across teams. Individual metrics like response rates and approval percentages remain important. Systemic metrics measure how often initiatives move forward without your direct involvement. Cultural metrics assess how influence skills spread throughout the organization. Network metrics evaluate how your influence reach expands over time. Sustainability planning prevents influence system burnout and maintains effectiveness over extended periods. You create redundancy so influence doesn't depend on single individuals or relationships. You establish succession planning for key influence positions. You build systems that maintain momentum during transitions and organizational changes. You measure system health and invest in maintenance before problems emerge. Risk management for scaled influence addresses what happens when systems fail or key allies become unavailable. You maintain backup influence channels and alternative approaches. You document critical relationships and influence strategies. You create cross-training so multiple people can implement key influence techniques. You prepare for political changes that might affect influence dynamics. The scaling challenge requires balancing comprehensiveness with practical implementation. You cannot create perfect systems that address every possible scenario. You focus on creating robust approaches for your most common influence challenges while leaving room for adaptation and improvisation. You build systems that support rather than constrain individual influence capabilities. Innovation in influence scaling explores new approaches made possible by technology and changing work patterns. Social platforms enable rapid coalition building around shared interests. Data analytics reveal influence patterns and opportunities that weren't visible before. Remote work creates new possibilities for relationship building across traditional boundaries. These innovations require experimentation and adaptation rather than rigid adherence to established methods. What scaled influence system will you create this quarter that multiplies your impact across at least 2 additional teams while maintaining the quality and sustainability of your current influence relationships? Identify one ally to develop this week and create a plan for teaching them a specific influence technique you use regularly. Map your current network to find 3 potential connectors who could amplify your influence across teams. Document one successful influence approach into a reusable template that others can adapt to their situations. Measure the current reach of your influence by tracking how many teams/projects benefit from your relationships and techniques. Establish a regular touchpoint system that maintains key relationships without requiring constant individual effort. Prologue. Your influence legacy. You started this journey believing influence was something other people possessed naturally or something you had to manipulate through clever tactics. You thought influence required charisma or political maneuvering or the kind of authority you didn't possess. You assumed getting results without formal power meant cutting corners or building elaborate schemes that felt uncomfortable and unsustainable. Scaling your influence. Look how far you've come. You now understand that influence within your immediate team built on credibility, relationships, and value creation. You secure resources, you recognize how cognitive biases shape every decision around you, and know how to work with human nature organizational challenges rarely stay contained within neat boundaries. Prepare systematically to drive outcomes that span multiple teams, and handle high-stakes conversations and levels of hierarchy. Single-person influence reaches natural limits when facing cross-functional initiatives or enterprise-wide meaningful outcomes in modern organizations. You must learn to scale your influence. The techniques you've learned compound over time in ways that transform your entire career or losing effectiveness. Early influence wins create credibility that makes individual excellence to systematic capability development. Each successful collaboration builds relationship networks that open new opportunities. You start creating systems, processes, your collaborative influence that multiply your potential ally for what any single person could achieve alone. Your influence reach expands exponentially through these individual contributor to professionals who master influence without authority become the most valuable people when your initiatives require coordination. They get assigned to critical projects because stakeholders trust they'll build the necessary support. Your influence with engineering because they demonstrate ability to drive outcomes across your relationships with product managers don't guarantee someone collaboration with operations rather than someone who waits for permission. In your current role, this reputation follows them throughout their careers. You need systematic approaches for building influence capacity your across diverse skills create ripple effects that extend far beyond your immediate focus on creating additional influence colleagues learn rather than simply your approaches and begin applying similar techniques. You develop allies who can carry your healthier collaboration patterns when influence replaces command and control dynamics. Even when you're not organizations become more innovative and responsive when others who share your objectives rather than being restricted to formal hierarchy. Other teams can become a catalyst for broader cultural development through your individual immediate scalability opportunity. The transformation from identify individuals within key stakeholder groups happens gradually through consistent similar challenges. You won't feel dramatically different after reading beyond immediate project needs. But you'll notice subtle shifts. You provide them with information, resources, and support projects move forward more smoothly because you understand the dynamics that accelerate that amplify your influence. You'll find yourself invited to more strategic discussions effective because others recognize your ability to drive outcomes rather than simple career advancement becomes more achievable when influence can articulate the benefits in language that resonates with your ideas will receive they have credibility rather than being dismissed due to presentation. They can navigate political dynamics more effectively than attract support because you've learned to frame them in ways they become that serve independently motivated to support your reputation will spread beyond your immediate team because successful the ally development creates positive word of network that travels that extends beyond your immediate stakeholders. The influence you identify you develop share your goals, how you approach every professional target groups. Instead of seeing collaborative relationships with multiple stakeholders, you'll recognize them as influence opportunities. Individuals who span different departments and have broad positive relationships. You'll see it as information potential allies who have already faced and solved instead of waiting for authority to implement relationship building with potential allies requires different approaches and relationship influence attempts. This new perspective makes on understanding their challenges and providing value before asking for support. You'll spend less time fighting organizational frictions that help them succeed regardless of your immediate projects. You'll experience the satisfaction that comes from driving outcomes rather than just completing assigned tasks. You create opportunities for collaboration that demonstrate the benefits because you know how to build the support necessary strategic alliance creation involves the ethical foundation of influence creates sustainable advantage that purely political approaches informal alliances emerge through shared interests your influence and mutual genuinely collaborative formal partnerships might include joint initiatives, opportunities, shared resources. When your collaborative creates win-win outcomes rather than zero-sum require ongoing investment to maintain effectiveness that continue as organizational dynamics shift. When you demonstrate consistent integrity in your others creates multipliers who can implement your future collaboration even easier. You transfer not just you've acquired work across the underlying mindset and analytical frameworks that make influence sustainable. The fundamental others develop their own motivation and relationship-making remain consistent regardless of context. You can adapt the specific culture within your sphere of unique situation while maintaining the core approach focuses on practical application rather than theoretical travel with you throughout your career. You demonstrate and continue generating value in real situations and explain your influence legacy includes not just frameworks but how you can adapt to their specific context. You model collaborative approaches you offer feedback and coaching rather than just providing answers. You demonstrate that results and relationships can learn from failures collaboratively rather than requiring capacity building within your team. multiplies
ethical
influence across all projects simultaneously than manipulation. Team members who develop strong
this legacy
skills
impacts
can secure
not just your
resources
career
and
but the broader
for their
culture of your
initiatives,
organization and
profession.
They can represent
the influence
team
advantage
interests
becomes
in
more
cross-functional
valuable as
discussions.
organizations
They can
continue
build
flattening
relationships
and work that
becomes
benefit the entire
increasingly
team.
collaborative,
Not just
the ability
individual
to drive
projects.
outcomes
This
without formal
creates
authority
compounding
separates
returns
high
on
performers
influence
from average
investment.
performers in
System
modern
building
knowledge work.
focuses on
Your
creating
investment
processes
in
that
developing
maintain
these skills
influence
positions
momentum
you to thrive
regardless of how
availability.
organizational structures
Standard
evolve.
templates for
Influence
proposals
becomes
stakeholder
not just a
analysis,
useful skill but
and
an essential
follow-up reduce the
capability
effort
for
required
professional
for each
success.
new influence attempt.
Continue practicing
Regular
and
relationship
refining these
maintenance
techniques.
systems ensure
Start with
connections
small
remain
influence
strong over
attempts
time
and build gradually
Documented
toward more
playbooks
complex
help
challenges.
others replicate
Measure your
successful
progress
approaches.
through both
Organizational
outcomes achieved and
influence
relationship
frameworks
quality
translate
maintained.
individual
Adapt
techniques
the
into
approaches to
systematic
fit your
approaches
specific
that entire
context and
departments can
organizational
adopt.
culture.
These
Most
frameworks
importantly,
provide structure
maintain
for
the
influence
ethical
attempts
foundation
that work
that
across
makes
different
influence
scenarios and
sustainable rather
stakeholder
than
groups.
manipulative.
They include
Your
templates,
influence legacy
scripts,
begins
and
now.
decision trees
With your
that
next
guide
interaction,
influence
your
efforts.
next proposal,
They
your
establish
next opportunity
for
to create
measuring
alignment
influence
and drive
effectiveness
outcomes.
and
The
identifying
skills you've
improvement
developed will serve you
opportunities.
throughout your
Culture
career
change
and create
around
positive
influence
impact for
transforms
everyone
it
you
from
work with.
individual skill
Time
to
to put this knowledge
organizational
into
norm.
action and
When
begin building
influence
the
becomes
influence
part of how
legacy
work
that
gets
will
done
define
rather
your
than just
professional
something
impact.
certain people do well.
Copyright.
The entire
Copyright
organization becomes more
2025 Lumen
effective.
Audiobooks.
People start treating
All rights
influence
reserved.
as a professional
No part of this
competency
book may be
rather than
reproduced
political
or
maneuver.
transmitted in
Collaboration
any form
without written
improves
permission
because
from the
everyone
author.
understands
Disclaimer.
and applies influence
This
principles.
book provides general
Cultural
information
transformation
and
requires
is not professional
leadership
advice.
modeling and
The
consistent
author and
reinforcement
publisher
of
disclaim
influence
any
values.
liability
Senior
arising
leaders
from the
must
use of this
demonstrate
information.
collaborative approaches
Consult
and value
qualified
diverse
professionals
perspectives.
for advice
Performance
specific to your
evaluation
situation.
should include relationship building and cross-functional collaboration. Success stories should highlight influence achievements alongside individual accomplishments.